I'm here. I'm here. I promise I'm here. Thank you for your patience, everybody. Welcome to the Southside Beat here on a Thursday. My name is Chris Halicke. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you again for those of you who are watching live here on YouTube on our DK Pittsburgh Sports Steelers channel. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being patient. Definitely getting a late start today. Just been a busy day, been a hectic day. I'll get into that here near the end of the show. Definitely want to talk some Steelers. Don't want to, start a Steelers show off with some non-Steelers stuff. So thank you guys so much for your patience. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to after the show. As Jerry says here, DK and Ramon is on today, 4 p.m. Eastern. DK and Ramon coming back. DK's back from vacation. Glad to have him back. I know he was excited to be at the ballpark yesterday. Good to see, what's going to happen with the next Ramon show. Always look forward to watching that. So, good day today here, and really appreciate your guys' patience with starting late today. But definitely want to touch on the latest Steelers news, which really, this time of year, the news usually comes, it's few and far between, but there is a little bit, and maybe it's because there's not much else going on right now, but there could be something underneath the surface to it. There might not be, just depends. But earlier this week, the past couple of days, we haven't had a show on the Southside Beat because, we're trying to get this freaking house sold. And again, I'll get to that stuff here at the end of the show, but latest, and Chloe here says, it's very dead in the football world. That's typically what happens between minicamp and training camp. It is very, very, this is when everybody plans their vacations, plans their weddings, plans anything non-football related, because it's just the best time of year to do it. It's the one time of the year the NFL really kind of unplugs, and baseball does its very best to try to, take center stage. It's just for a short amount of time, and then training camp starts and it's back on the NFL. But so some news is from this week. The latest is Trenton, Thompson, and Denzel Mims were waived, which opens up a couple of roster spots. So typically that kind of stuff, a couple of players are waived. You're like, all right, no big deal. When there's stuff, there's other things going on. There's OTAs and mini camp, or even when we get to training camp, players get waived and signed and cut and traded and whatever all the time. It's typical stuff that goes on. But it's one of those things where you're kind of wondering, okay, could there actually be something here, right? Steelers open up a couple roster spots. It's June 20th. Right? Still got several weeks until training camp. Training camp, players don't report for it's still over a month away until players even report. So when you add up the fact that the Steelers opened up some cap space by restructuring Alex Highsmith's contract, they did that the day before the draft. Now there's a couple roster spots open. Is Omar Khan giving himself the necessary cap space and roster space to possibly finally land one of these receivers in a trade? And I'll put it this way. I think if Omar Khan had his way, right? If he had his way, I think they get one of these receivers, whether it's Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Cortland Sutton, DK Metcalf, any of these receivers that have been brought up. I think if Omar Khan had his way, they would be acquiring one of these receivers at some point, whether it be before training camp, during training camp, near the end of preseason, prior to the season, whatever it is. I think if he had his way, he would get one of these receivers. I truly think that. But I also don't think that Omar Khan is desperate enough to overpay to get any of those guys. And when I say overpay, I mean giving up the necessary assets to get one of those guys, trade assets. And the reason why I think that is because as aggressive as Omar Khan has seemed to be since he's taken over the GM chair on South Water Street, he actually, it's funny because as soon as when we were talking with him at the owners meetings in March, and we were asking, I don't remember who asked it, but he was asked a question about being thought of as an aggressive GM. And he said, I don't feel like I'm an aggressive GM. I don't feel like I'm aggressive. I just feel like I'm going to do whatever I can to get the team better. And as soon as he said that, it's like the wheels started slowly turning. I started thinking about things, and I'm like, you know what? I think he's actually right. I think we think about aggressive because, okay, he's been really active in free agency. Okay, well, Kevin Colbert might have been really active in free agency if he didn't have a quarterback contract weighing down the salary cap. Who knows? We'll never know. We didn't see how Kevin Colbert operated with that kind of cap space in the last 20 years, however, 18 years for sure, because he had Ben Roethlisberger. So they didn't need to go and get a whole bunch of things in free agency like the Steelers have to do now and have the freedom to do now because they're paying quarterbacks nothing. So, and the thing that really made it make sense was how he handled the Justin Fields stuff. Because from the time that he first contacted Ryan Poles, the GM of the Bears, to the time that trade actually went down, it was several weeks in between. So that shows patience to me. That shows that Omar Khan is, first off, willing to do the job as a GM. The job as a GM is to make sure that you've touched that. I'm going to say it again here, that you're going to do your due diligence. You're going to do everything you possibly can to have feelers out on anything that any avenue in which you can make your team better. And that's why anytime you see on social media or especially on Twitter that somebody, Omar Khan reached out to the Vikings about Justin Jefferson, that's not breaking news. It's not that. It's just not. A GM contacting a team about a player is not breaking news. That's a GM doing his job. And so if he reached out to John Lynch about Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk, that's not breaking news. That's just, hey, John, heard you might be shopping any of these receivers. What's the asking price? And then he's told, screw off, we're not trading these guys. Click. That's the end of the conversation. At least that's just a GM doing his job. Now, if those talks end up continuing and they have multiple phone calls and those talks continue, that's different, right? And there have been reports that the Steelers and 49ers were, I don't know how close they were, but at least in discussions about a trade during the draft. And so that tells me there's interest on the Steelers' end. But also seeing the way he handled the stuff with Fields, it's not like as soon as he reached out to Ryan Poles, he's like, okay, I want to see what the price is for Justin Fields. Let's get a deal done now. That's not the way it works. And they didn't have to address that until later on because I don't think they had the intention of getting Justin Fields once they signed Russell Wilson. Their plan was to sign Russ, have him compete with Kenny Pickett, and have that be the quarterback competition. And that, Kenny Pickett requesting a trade threw a monkey wrench into that. And then that's when light bulb goes off for Omar Khan. Well, we've already talked to the Bears about Justin Fields. He's not traded yet. Let's call him back up. Let's see if we can work something out. Bada bing, bada boom. The rest is history. But the several week gap between, just because they wanted to hurry up or just because they wanted to get the quarterback situation taken care of didn't mean that they were going to overpay or they were going to jump too quickly to possibly upgrade it. They were going to do all of the necessary work that they had to do with all of the quarterbacks they were interested in. And that's what they did. And I think it's the same thing here, that Omar Khan probably has a price in his head somewhere, whether it's a first round pick straight up, whether it's a second and a fourth, whether it's just a second, whatever the price is. I'm not trying to say that they should trade this or whatever. I'm just saying Omar probably has a price in his head in which he's willing to give up, that he's willing to pay to acquire Brandon Ayuk or to acquire Deebo Samuel or Cortland Sutton or DK Metcalf or any of these receivers that have been rumored or connected to the Steelers in rumors. He probably has a price in his head. And as soon as one of those teams is willing to match that, then Omar will pounce on it. And until then, I think Omar is willing to play the waiting game. And I think that's why, if a trade happens, I don't see it happening anytime soon. I think it's going to be a while. So that is where aggressive might get a little overplayed. And I think the patience is what really is going to make Omar a really good GM, because then you are dictating the moves that you want to make. You're not having to acquiesce to somebody else's demands in order to get the stuff that you want. Now, player contracts, that's a completely different situation. You're going to have to end up overpaying for certain players. It just comes with the territory. And there are ways to manage and to structure contracts so that you can have it work. But when you're talking about trading for a player, those draft picks carry a lot of value. And I think that's why Omar has a certain price in his head. I'm not willing to give up any more than this. And if John Lynch or whoever else isn't willing to agree on that price, then I'll wait him out. And if it doesn't happen, then it doesn't happen. I'm comfortable with what we have. I'd rather have this. I'd rather have Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel or whoever else. But if that doesn't work out, at least we have extra cap space. We can always roll that over. And who knows? Maybe Calvin Austin takes off. Who knows? Maybe Van Jefferson looks a lot like the guy that the Rams had whenever they won the Super Bowl. You know? If you put that Van Jefferson next to George Pickens, I actually think that's a pretty good complementary piece. Would you rather have Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel? Of course you would. That's a no-brainer. So, one question here from Travis is, who's your pick? If I had to pick a receiver that they trade for, if I had to pick who I think Omar would rather have, I think it'd be Brandon Ayuk. I think he's the younger guy. You'd have to pay for him. They're not making that trade unless they're paying him. And Steelers have the cap space. They do. They have the ability to sign him to that kind of contract. But how much sense does it make? You know, because you also have to think about the quarterback position. You have to think about possibly paying Najee Harris. You have to think about possibly paying Jalen Warren. You have to think about possibly paying Pat Freiermuth. There are other guys who you have to consider also giving contracts to. So there are, and that's why somebody like Omar is a GM and I'm not, because he knows the cap way better than I do. And if he pulls off this trade, if he does trade for Brandon Ayuk, let's just say that hypothetically, then he's doing it knowing how to manage the cap so that he can have Brandon Ayuk, so he can sign a quarterback, whether it's Russ, whether it's Fields, whoever it is. He'll find a way to get it done. So, but for right now, it's all speculation. We don't know what's going to happen. A couple of roster spots are open, and maybe that these roster spots are being opened up so that they can add another specialist or two. Maybe that, I know that sounds like, wow, that talk about the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of excitement. But truth be told, I mean, right now there's only one punter on the roster. Now, they probably don't need to get another punter but they also didn't need to get another kicker. Like Chris Boswell is one of the best kickers in the game when he's on his game, and he had a good season last year. So, like, they didn't need to get another kicker, but they have Matthew Wright. They don't have to get another punter, but it probably would behoove them to get another punter just in case something did happen to the Bill Burr Cameron Johnston. If something does happen to him, you already have another punter in camp, so it wouldn't shock me if one of the roster spots is filled by a punter. It just wouldn't shock me. So, and Barber asks here, what if there's no trade? Then what? Well, then they roll with what they have. And that doesn't sound very attractive to a lot of Steelers fans. And shoot, man, I talked about it yesterday. I was on Fox Sports Radio in Rapid City, South Dakota yesterday, and was asked to break down the roster. I said I think this roster is in a really good spot. I think the roster is the strongest it's been in a while, actually. Maybe even better than what it was in like Ben's last season in terms of the totality of the roster. But receiver there's a glaring weakness at receiver right now. And maybe, like I said, who knows? Maybe Van Jefferson is healthy, and maybe he can be what he was when he was on the Rams in 2021. That production, you could live with that production. He had like 50-something catches and over 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. If you have that next to George Pickens, that'll work. Especially when you consider that Pat Freiermuth is going to have a bigger role in the offense, when you consider the fact that this is going to be a run-first offense with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Like, you'll take that kind of production from number 2 receiver any day of the week, especially if George Pickens is your undoubted number 1 guy. But there are question marks there because that season for Van Jefferson was 2021. There's been 2 full seasons since then. And that production has not been there in 2 different places, and with the Rams and then under Arthur Smith with the Falcons. So you definitely need to get, I think that the receiver room needs to be upgraded, but if they don't upgrade it, there are options. Maybe Calvin Austin can finally figure something out because he has an offensive coordinator who would be able to use him. And I talked about it in Chalk Talk. Calvin Austin was limited to a lot of go routes, a lot of deep posts, and then a lot of curls and hitches. And then anything else after that was all outbreaking stuff. Man, you really want to get Calvin Austin dangerous. Like, yes, he can be used, in the deep ball game for sure. He's got the speed to do it. But how about you get him some routes where he can catch the ball in stride, where he's not having to go out, turn around, and sit down. How about you give him some slants, give him some drags, give him some routes where he can catch the ball in stride and try to make something happen after the catch. The dude is dynamic with the ball in his hands. He has great start and stops. He could do some things. Shoot, man, you could see what he was doing in punt return stuff. If he's got some time and space and is able to catch the ball in stride, like, he could do some stuff. That's what I'm saying. Like, I would like to see what happens with Calvin Austin when he's doing that. Does he have some room to grow as a route runner? Of course he does. But also make it a little easier for him. That's something Matt Canada's offense didn't do. He didn't make it easy for anybody. And that's what really kind of handcuffed everybody, from Kenny Pickett to Deontay Johnson to George Pickens. Everybody was handcuffed in that offense because it wasn't easy. Nothing was ever easy. Kenny Pickett if he wasn't throwing a perfect pass, a lot of the time, it wasn't going to work. It was forced into perfection. And then sometimes when he missed the open throws, it became that much more painful because, man, these don't come along very often. Right? So, and Travis says, what a story it would be if Russ takes us to the Super Bowl this year. Shoot, man. I will say this, though. I saw a comment on Twitter. I don't know who made it. One of the Steelers fans I follow who, also follows me back. And the last time the Celtics won the NBA Finals in the following NFL season, the Steelers won the Super Bowl. And I just thought that was funny because I'm like, oh, man, here we go. There's going to be some more people who are gonna tie this together. Oh, like, oh, no, here we go. Chances on our side. Last time the Celtics won the finals, the Steelers end up winning the Super Bowl the next NFL season. It just, I love. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny to me. Good stuff, man. Lori says, I love how we also call it Twitter. Yeah, I can't call it I can't call it X. It's just it's that app has gone to so it's just it's so terrible now. It's terrible. But yeah, so okay, 20 minutes in, we got a good amount. I'll give you guys an update on me getting up there because we have good development here. We are finally under contract on this house. We accepted an offer yesterday. The option period for it started today. So today was the first day of the option period. It's 7 days. I'll feel a lot better when we're on the other end of the option period. So, because obviously, like, right now they can still opt out and they don't lose any earnest money or anything like that. So, and honestly, I don't even know how much I'm allowed to talk about it. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And Jay Moods says, really the thing, don't celebrate until closing. Yeah, that's really the way it goes. Especially with certain types of loans. Again, I don't want to say anything in which I can get in trouble, but certain types of loans, there are more hurdles to jump through than others. So, but it's still a really positive step in the right direction. Like I said, I'll feel a lot better when we're on the other end of the option period, because that's whenever, if we get on the other end of the option period with this one, that's whenever I'm going to fly up there, take a couple days. We're going to put, take a look at a lot of houses. So, and Cody says, yeah, like obviously anything can make someone back out. And yeah, there are a lot of things that play a role. That's why the option period is such a like stressful time, because at this point they can opt out and no harm done pretty much. But, when they get on the other end of the option period, yes, they can still opt out, but they would lose, like if they put any earnest money down, they would lose that money. But if they lose financing, if they lose their job, there are so many different variables that go into this. And if you've ever sold a home, you fully understand this. Even if you've purchased a home, you understand the buying side of it. But when you're on the seller side, a lot of it is out of the control. Plus, there's the whole list that you exchange of, like, when you come in, you're like, okay, we want the seller to do this, and this. And is the seller willing to do those things? And you try to agree on that list. And I remember doing the whole thing when we bought this house. So, yeah, it's a stressful time, but again, it's still a positive step in the right direction. And definitely hoping for the best that we see this one go all the way to closing, because that would get us up there in time. I would be getting up there pretty much right before training camp started, but I'd still be up there in time. So I'm going to be up there in time no matter what, but it would give an opportunity for the entire family to be able to get up there all at one time before training camp. And so that is really the goal. I didn't want to spend any time away from my family. So, Mike in Texas asks, are you going to look for a 90-day close or short, quick close? Well, the close for this house is 30 days. It's a little over 30 days. I don't want to give any details. I don't know what I'm allowed to talk about, what I'm not allowed to talk about. I don't want to, but the closing date would be before I would have to be there for training camp. Not long before, but it would be sometime next month. I'll put it that way. J Moods here says 30 to 45 is standard, and yes, and it's closer to the 30. And I'm finding that to be more typical with a lot of stuff. You can't, and Barbara says, don't jinx, dude, trust me, I'm not trying to jinx anything. Trust me, I'm not trying to jinx anything. And yes, you really don't breathe a sigh of relief until the final paperwork is signed and you have closed, right? But the further along in the process that you get, the more and more you trend in the right direction. And so that's why you got, the first step is getting under contract, right? That's the first step. You get under contract. And then after that, you do everything from the seller side, especially on our side. You're doing everything you possibly can to make sure that the contract doesn't fall out from underneath you. So, Yeah, guys talking about different types of loans. I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff, but yes, certain types of loans are and Damon, I mean, I could say it on our end because shoot, man, you guys know my wife is a veteran. We have the possibility of doing a VA loan. And so that might be able to help us out whenever we're looking for a house up there, that we could close on that faster. Hoping that's the case. Obviously nowadays we just want a good rate. And so if a conventional loan gives us a better rate than the VA, then that's what we're going to do. I just want the best rate we can possibly get right now, because rates suck right now. So, and yeah, and Barbara Santa here, we need you up north, Chris, dude. At this rate, man, we just want to be done with it. We want to be done. Obviously, now whenever you start talking about certain dates that you're going to be up there and everything like that, it starts to get more real, and you start to be like, man, I'm moving away from family and friends. And, but at the same time, like, we're making the move for a reason. And I cannot tell you how much I'm just ready to get up there and get to work and give you guys the best Steelers coverage I could possibly give you guys. I'm so excited. It almost feels like I've been doing a lot of stuff with one hand tied behind my back because I'm observing from 1,200 miles away. It's so hard to do it that way, to give you really good Steelers coverage. And I'm so glad that something like Chalk Talk was born from it, in which I was doing everything I possibly could to give some sort of added oomph to the Steelers coverage. And Chalk Talk was born from that. And now we have the possibility of blending what I've been doing with Chalk Talk and along with what I know and what you guys know that I can do on the beat, and marry that together and turn this into the best Steelers coverage in the area. And I truly believe that. I wouldn't say that just to say, oh, we're the best, but no, like for real, man, to give you guys Steelers coverage you can't get anywhere else. And that's why I'm excited about it. Excited about the possibility here. And so definitely just definitely excited about getting up there. And again, this was one gigantic step in the right direction. Not over yet, still a long way to go, but we are we're, like I said, we're heading in the right direction, and just praying for the absolute best to come of this. So really appreciate you guys. To get back to some Steelers stuff, Lou asks a really good question here. Would it be the worst thing in the world to get a high draft pick for once? No, it would not be the worst thing to get a high draft pick. But I will say, though, like, the Steelers had a lot of success. Like, for example, when you think about it, like in the 2000s, sure, having that one, like, thinking about the 2000s, right? 2000, I don't remember what the record was in 2000, but they were kind of mid. But then 01, AFC Championship, lost there. 2002, they go 10-5-1. They lose in the divisional round, thanks Joe Nedney and his Oscar performance. Then that 03 season where they go, I think it was 6-10, and that gives them Ben Roethlisberger, right? They get Big Ben from that one losing season, and that changes their fortunes drastically, because then they have a bunch of good seasons and they still draft well, despite picking near the end of the first round or in the latter third of the first round, whatever it is. Outside of that 8-8 season in 06 and whatever else, they still were having a lot of picks be late, and they still had a lot of good players that they got. Sure, you have a much better chance of getting high impact players, but you don't necessarily always have to pick in the top 10 to get those guys. Shoot, man, TJ Watt, look at where he was drafted. Cam Hayward, look where he was drafted. They've Travis says they were 9-7 in 2001. Yeah, they just missed the playoffs. I know that. I couldn't remember if they went 8-8 or 7-9 or 9-7. The record was fuzzy to me. I just knew it was. Yeah, I knew they didn't make the playoffs. I just knew it was they were kind of mid that season. But overall, man, like a high draft pick, sure, but there's nothing guaranteed from a high draft pick. And if anything, man, it almost hurts even more if you get that high draft pick and he turns into a bust. A 20-something pick in the first round turning into a bust, yeah, that sucks. But Devin Bush, why do you think the Devin Bush pick hurts so much? Because they traded up to get him, took him 10th overall, and God, terrible. It just did not work. One of the biggest busts in at least the 21st century for the Steelers in terms when you're looking at the first round. It doesn't always work out. And so I think, and Barbara bringing up probably the best example of Jamarcus Russell, man. Shoot, man. I think we've done it on the show before. I think if you went through the 2000s or that stretch between 2000 and 2012, I don't think there was a true bust, first round bust in that entire span. I think the closest one you could possibly say was Ziggy Hood. And yeah, definitely did not live up to being a first round talent. But I mean, absolute bust, like Devin Bush, Artie Burns level? No way. No way. Mendenhall at least had some productive seasons, right? I mean, there were a couple first round picks in there that obviously you're not going to hit on every single one, but the percentage that they hit on during that time, they were drafting really, really well. And past couple draft, obviously be very, very critical of some of Colbert's later years with the draft, because those draft classes are nowhere to be found now, at least not in Pittsburgh. And so be very critical of those. They're deserving of criticism, but the past couple draft classes have looked pretty good. Now, can't quite put the final reviews on, 2000 or on 2023 yet. They've only had one season under their belt. You still got a couple seasons before we can say that was looks good right now, trending in the right direction, but man, you never know. And then, this past draft class, man, that not one of these players has even stepped on an NFL field yet. I'm talking about like in a stadium. So never know, man. Like looking good right now, though. The draft classes are looking better, but we'll see. We need at least a couple more years before we can really be able to judge these classes. And, maybe if that's all it is, shoot, man, Mike Tomlin was able to rebuild the defense. Whenever all those guys from the late 2000s, early 2010s, those guys all started leaving, and he had to rebuild the defense. The worst they ever were 8-8, and they were able to, replace guys, and didn't quite get the defense back to where it was, obviously, but that was also a really, really those 08 and 2010 defenses are some of the best of all time, right? So that's a tall ask to get the defense back to that level. But shoot, man, if there's ever a season where the defense could be that good, it might be this season. Defense looks really good on paper. I'll put it that way. Looks really good on paper. Maybe would feel a little bit better about the defensive line if I knew, if Cam Hayward was going to be healthy and beat Cam Hayward, or if you knew that Keanu Benton was going to definitely take a leap in year 2, you feel a little bit better about the defensive line at that point. But the rest of the defense looks really solid, dude. Looks really good. So maybe you don't have to ever have one of those high draft picks. Could it hurt? No, it might not hurt, but I don't think you have to do that. The NFL is not one of those leagues where you have to bottom out in order to be good. This isn't the NHL. This isn't the NHL where you have, in order to go into a full-blown rebuild, you've got to bottom out and get those top draft picks so that you can try to, possibly find yourself the next franchise player, right? A big reason why the Penguins were as successful as they were and went on the playoff run that they went on, was because, man, they were terrible for 3-4 years in a row and were able to draft guys like Marc-Andre Fleury and Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby and Jordan Stahl and all those guys, and build a core because they had number one pick. Well, I know not number one pick every year, but, I know Malcolm was, famously, the Penguins didn't win the lottery that year, or didn't win the draft lottery that year. So Ovechkin went to the Capitals, and so they got Malkin, and so but still, it's not, the NFL is different. You don't have to bottom out in order to build a good roster. All right. Well, that's probably a good place to end the show. I don't want to run it right into the start of the Ramon show for sure. So definitely obviously excited, for the news I was able to share with you guys. Definitely hoping that we continue the right direction very early in the process. So, and Demond putting a nice bow to tie here at the end of the show. He says, I want pick 32. That's always the pick that you want in the draft. You want to have that 32nd pick in the first round. So, but appreciate you guys. Thank you for your patience, both today for being late and also not having a show the past couple days while we were obviously having very productive days for the house because now we're under contract. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you guys. Coming up in 15 minutes, DK and Ramon Foster show coming up. Definitely stay tuned here. Go take a potty break. Go do what you got to do. Get a quick bite to eat, and we'll talk tomorrow. Maybe we'll do another Q&A Football Friday tomorrow. So definitely looking forward to it. Looking forward to bringing our new guy on whenever he gets here. That's in about a week and a half or so. And like I said, now that I can step back and take a little bit of a breather, maybe I can work the phones a little bit and get you guys a special guest at least one time before we have a new guy comes on. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. See you tomorrow. Catch you on the flippity flip.